Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, I was kind of expecting to see the first bits of new information from CCP, but so far we still haven't really gotten any concrete news on their plans for the game in 2021. Well, let's see how it all plays out, and then perhaps I should try to switch topic, because something that I did see is a couple of comments here and there from players that are trying to get back into EVE Online, but are actually having a pretty difficult time finding the motivation to do so because of how hard everything is in the game at the moment, like the mining changes, probably the raiding changes as well. And so kind of want to give you guys a little bit of my perspective on that for this intro. We'll try and make it quick, but yeah, at the moment you can't go out there with half a dozen roar calls and watch the ore flow like an endless tide. You also can't just go out there in your super carrier anymore and watch the fattest ticks in the game come in your wallet. That is just not there anymore, but it's the same for everyone. Everyone is struggling in the sandbox at the moment, where making ISK is probably the hardest it's been in maybe a decade or something like that. And what that does mean, in my opinion, is that number one, the things you do still manage to do have a lot of value in the game. Anything you manage to gather together will actually probably be worth a lot for a long time. I think that's specifically a big advantage of making stuff in EVE Online. And the other one is, well, I'm also not super active in EVE Online at the moment. Instead, I'm focusing on what I enjoy. And for me, that's still exploration. I really do like that. Go out there, try to find a couple good sites. Sometimes you get some good drops. You know, a little bit of luck comes into all of this as well. But that's what I enjoy. And so I'm taking this time to really do and focus on what I enjoy in EVE Online. And I'm seeing every headway that I make, whether it's in the wallet, whether it's with stuff that I'm producing, like my PI, my blueprint copies, the drops that I've got, faction drops and things like that. All of that, I see that as being highly valuable. Now, one thing I will say, not all of this will be super valuable in the future. Of course, knowing exactly what that's going to be is impossible. That's going to depend on too many factors, right? The sandbox economy, CCP's plans for the future, how they're planning to change things, right? If they're making ISK a lot easier, then ratting a lot of ISK under these difficult circumstances is not the best thing you can do. But the ISK you make, turn that into the right product by buying it on the market, by being prepared, doing a little bit of research, can be super valuable in the future. So I would say, yeah, keep in mind that while it's very difficult to get stuff done in EVE Online at the moment, the things you do, the effort you're putting into the game are very likely to give you lasting benefits into the game for a pretty long time, because it's the same situation for everyone. Alright, with that introduction done, and hopefully I can motivate some of you guys to find what's fun for you in the game, and yeah, to try and see your efforts in the game as being both fun and rewarding, because looking at it from a longer term perspective, I do think that they are. So next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store and see what's happening over here. I thought we had some new skins again. Yeah, Zakura Shumiu skins. I think we saw those last week as well. We get some bundles. I'm not seeing any sales. What's happening with the services? Nothing special in the New Eden store. That means that we can go to the market, and one of the reasons why I'm making this EVE talk is because it's on the market, of course, where we have a chance to try and figure out what is it that is actually going to potentially increase in value, be super valuable in the future when it comes to potential changes from CCP. So let's get started with some plex and stuff at 4:15. Like that. And this is of course a very unique category. Let's start here with plex themselves. Very interesting. Also not really my expectation, but we are touching the 2.5 million average. We're basically very close to 1 year low point. We are definitely very low at the moment. In GTA itself, sellers have gone below 2.6 million, buyers are below 2.5 million, and then in the player-owned trade hubs, very close to that price, but also below 2.6. And do the buyers go up? They go up just a touch, but they're staying below 2.5. So it is now very possible to grab a plex at 2.5 million, which is definitely pretty cheap if you look at this full 1 year chart. And and this is potentially one of those places where you have to, where you can, pour your ISK into it, hoping for more value in the future. Your thinking should then be, of course, why would it increase in value, or why is it decreasing in value at the moment? I would say that there's two possibilities. Number one, of course, is deflation. We saw in the economic numbers for December that ratting income has been hit very hard. And that in fact incursions for the month of December, I think at some points have brought in more ISK into the game than active ratting in Nullsec, I think throughout the entirety of New Eden. A rather unique situation, of course, which puts a lot of pressure on prices, because less ISK flowing into the game means that ISK becomes a lot more valuable, and so prices tend to go down, and number one casualty may just be plex, which is clearly under pressure at the moment. And so that's something that you have to think about, and I also mentioned that in this video. I'm still of two minds on this. Number one, I don't think that CCP would like incursions to stay as profitable compared to ratting then, so they could be in the crosshairs for that nerf gun, and could take a big hit, which would mean more deflation potentially if that's what's happening. On the other hand, this could also be the point where CCP decides that perhaps we should try to increase the ratting rewards, the benefits of going out there and shooting at NPCs a little bit more, and that could be the turnaround, the start of the increase in availability of resources of ISK into the game, because CCP also has said in that dev blog about the economic outlook that they're feeling now, stuff is in the too hard place, in the over nerf place, but they need us to be here a little bit so that we can also go through a lot of the stocks, get the average economy back in the right spot, and then slowly increase the potential rewards that are available in the game. So this is the gamble that you're taking on the market at the moment. All we can say, of course, is that we're very close to 1 year low point at 2.5 million. We've seen that potentially prices of plex can go a lot higher, and then of course the gamble that you're taking is are we going to see further nerfs to ISK creation, for instance for the incursions? I think that's possible. Or is this a turnaround, and will we potentially see some hype from CCP, some more activity coming back into the game, more demand for plex as well, and then we could start to see prices go up? It's difficult one. You saw I've got 8,500 plex at this point, so I feel like I'm ready. If the plex prices start to go up, I've got a nice set of them ready to take advantage of that. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificate, following the plex chart very closely, also looking pretty low. 1.3 billion for the sellers, and a little bit above 1.2 billion for the buyers. Well, a decent amount above 1.2 billion, gotta be honest on that. Can be an interesting purchase as well. Keep one thing in mind, of course, volumes are not very high. If you're gonna buy or risk everything on 100 multiple pilot train certificates, you could be looking at losses or having to hold on to that asset for a very long time. You can clearly see though that trade is down to very low volumes on very low prices. So clearly a year ago there was a lot more interest in the multiple pilot train certificates than there is now. If that interest would come back on, for instance, some hype from CCP, then potentially this could be an interesting item to hold as well, of course. I personally kind of prefer plex. It can always be easier to move that stuff once the profit is realized. Skill extractors next, also right on that 1 year low point as well, going for 290 million for the sellers, buyers at 287. That is an unbelievably small margin, about 1%. 3 million ISK, less than that between sellers and buyers on something costing 300 million. That is very unique, and could potentially be seen as another one of those bottom forming operations, to be honest, because the market is clearly willing to pay almost 290 million ISK, but the sellers are willing to dump them at almost 290 as well. So this could be another one of those potential opportunities, but again, keep the big picture in mind, of course. For this plex stuff specifically, you are kind of dependent on what's happening in very broad strokes. We tend to be impacted by CCP changes, which are of course very unpredictable, general economic changes like what we're seeing now with the resource drought, with how difficult it is to create ISK in the game, And on the big nullsec groups, massive wars actually have a big impact on general activity in the game, on general exposure of the game, and that has a big impact on just demand for plex, for extractors, for injectors, for certificates, for all of that type of stuff. So keep that in mind. Of course, there's never a full answer, but this could be one place for you to pour your ISK if you're expecting inflation in the future. These extractors then get turned into injectors. So let's take a look at the large-scale injectors that have done their investor bounce, I would say, once reaching the one-year low point of 630 million for the average price. So we're talking now 647 for the sellers and still 617 for the buyers. Definitely a bigger margin than for the extractors, but you could say that the cheapest stuff has already been snagged up by the market, as our average price has moved up from 630 to 640. So for here another sign that parts of the market think perhaps we are starting to reach a bottom. Once we reach a one-year low, let's really try to snag the cheapest stuff and be ready with that investment. I think that the small scale injectors are going to move in tandem with this one. Yeah, exactly. After breaking 130 million, you can clearly see that investors started to wait for that bottom to form. It happened at I'm not really sure what that price exactly is going to be, but probably when we broke 135 million or something like that. And then you can see the volumes here as investors jumped in on anything below that price and then really bought this little bottom, which will, well, hopefully for them be an actual bottom. At the moment they're selling for 130 million. Buyers are still at 122.4, so you could probably still try to grab it a cheap one at the moment, but it's not going to be easy considering the buying that's happened here and the average prices that are being realized at the moment. We still have another injector to take a look at, which is the daily alpha injector, which unlike the large and the smalls, which have just reached a one-year low point, have actually done really well over the last couple of months, staying above 45 million for most of it. At the moment, 44 million for the sellers and 40 million for the buyers. I would say that, of course, we're not at the very high points at the moment, and this could actually be the ISK deflation showing up. I think that interest from alpha players may not be down, just a little bit harder at the moment to earn ISK for them, especially maybe a part of them that are active in nullsec and used to try to do some ratting. There's definitely ships that they can do that in, and as a result we get a little bit of pressure on the price, but still very respectable, just below 45 million. Buyers are going up to 40 million ISK, so there is strong demand for these daily alpha injectors, and I think this shows that dynamic, right? Of course it's harder to make ISK, but a couple of months ago here in December, it also took you 48.3 million to earn a daily alpha injector. Now, with about 40 million, a little bit above that, you can actually buy a daily alpha injector. So this is something very unique in my opinion in a sandbox economy. Sure, there's gonna be winners and losers, but it all does tend to balance out because of its sandboxy nature, right? Efforts are never really wasted. Of course, sometimes your efforts find more reward when things end up being in demand and some other efforts are not, but you can easily basically move your efforts into the different markets when you look at charts and just by selling and buying on the market. So it's a fascinating game, and it's a fascinating time in my opinion to try to stick it out and to try to basically get the most out of your efforts. After that, we still have the hypercore to take a look at, and that one is continuing to decline. So maybe a sign that general activity at the moment is down a little bit, to 66,000 for the sellers, to 45,000 for the buyers. Definitely breaking through that summer bottom where we stayed above 280 pretty consistently. Could be, I mean, I've seen less hype, you could say, around the big war in the Imperium. Now that those titans are stuck there, it's like probably a little bit of a stalemate. Maybe people are thinking, what the hell are we going to do next? And perhaps as a result, general activity in the game may have declined a little bit. I also do think that there was like sort of a sale or something like that happened here that has crashed the price down. Maybe on hypercores it needs a little bit more time to be fully absorbed, because it is still a niche activity. While it could find its tentacles, you could say, in all aspects of the economy, because the Hypernet offers you can do that with all types of modules, you could say, probably not with minerals and things like that, but for a lot of it. And so as a result, almost any market can find its way through the hypercores as well. So yeah, maybe it's not entirely wrong to see this as a slight downturn in the activity in the game. I myself am also eagerly waiting any information on what CCP is planning for 2021. So wouldn't blame anyone for lowering their activity a little bit. And did we miss anything? Nope, that's it. That was the Plex stuff. Very interesting, of course, if you're expecting inflation in the future. A lot of these are at or close to 1-year low points. Next up, let's take a look at minerals, coming in at 1555. And so, as we all know by now, I think these minerals have been doing very well over the last year. Now, titanium, alright, dropping back towards the 6 ISK, the place where we started off last year. So massive gains up to 10 ISK in April and in October, and then titanium basically normalizing with, let's take a look at the prices in Jeddah, 620 for the sellers and 595 for the buyers. This is now a price where, well, you could go both ways. You could say, all right, this is still all right for my titanium. I'm going to sell and try to sell above 6 ISK, which is still not that bad, but it's not 7 and over, where I would say it's a no-brainer. That's a good price. If you're at this point starting to hoard your titanium, I would definitely not blame you either. The real question that you have to ask yourself, of course, is what's the reason for this pullback? Is it because there's lower demand, or is it because supplies have gone up? I personally think that supplies will have come online after all of the changes, and this could also be a part as to why the Nelsec war is going a little bit lower, because all of the alliances, in my opinion, the big groups, have been working and putting efforts into getting those mineral flows up and running, including raising a lot of the neutral free ports in some high-sec systems that they want control over, like Dital for instance. And now that all of that is up and running, I do think that there are bigger inflows of titanium happening, which is the reason for this normalization of the price, which honestly, if you're looking for a better time buying Tech 1 or producing Tech 1 chips, this is of course good news. So for miners themselves, a couple months ago selling your titanium would have felt really good. Now it's a little bit less, of course. We still have another one mined from Isaac here is Pyrite, losing a little bit of value as well, going below 20 ISK, but not crashing down just yet. 1878 for the sellers and 1750 for the buyers. A little bit of pressure on volumes as well. Look at that, last 24 hours, quite a bit of Pyrite coming in. This could be the exact same story with bigger mining groups having organized and now being actually able to bring a little bit more to the market, putting some pressure on the price. This is still very much a winner over the year, of course, still almost quadruple the price at the start of the year, and so Pyrite is still definitely okay to mine at the moment as well. Historically speaking, I would say that this is also a normal price, just like for titanium. Next up, we've got Mexalon, and this one is slightly different because 50 ISK is low, but 75 ISK is already a normal price, historically speaking, in my experience, for Mexalon. And so here we just have these massive gains, and we're actually plateauing at a high point of 144 ISK for the sellers, 139 for the buyers. Look at that narrow margin compared to titanium and pyrite, which are a little bit under pressure at the moment. No, this is still very much in demand, and I would say that this is the number one bottleneck once again when it comes to any production actually that goes all out, but specifically in nullsec, it's very hard for them to get enough Mexalon for regular production cycles. And so this is a massive premium. And of course, if you are mining at the moment and you want to get the most out of your efforts, focus as much as possible on Mexalon sources, sell that to the market. And then of course you have to decide, right, with your pyrite, with your tritanium. Up to a couple of weeks ago, and especially a couple of months ago, it was of course the exact same situation. But now for tritanium, you can definitely start to decide, well, maybe I should hold on to some of it for times when we could expect bigger prices, whether it's on inflation or whether it is on more activity, more war, more destruction. And pyrite, I would say, is still definitely pretty high as well. I would not hesitate to sell considering this chart. But Mexalon, of course, your focus, and the more of that you can get right now, the higher value you get out of it. And of course, I would honestly sell that into ISK and then decide, do I want to keep ISK in the wallet or do I want to diversify in other things? You may already start to feel that from my experience. I'm definitely at the moment looking into diversifying as much as possible. So I've got plex, I've got a decent wallet, I've got stuff all over the place, and I don't want to increase my wallet even more. Anything that I make now, I'll either put into some pimped out chips, which could increase efficiency, or start some investments into different categories. And I would not be Mexalon, because Mexalon is super high at the moment. This would be one where I would make efforts, mine for that, and then try to turn that into other stuff that will probably maintain or increase in value more later down the line. For Isogen, we're still at 40 ISK. In fact, we are down as well. A little bit of general pressure in almost all the minerals here so far, going back below 40 ISK. We're talking 39.80 for the sellers and 38 ISK for the buyers. Still pretty sizable volumes with another 15 million, 38 million, 22 million right here. And honestly, for Isogen, for me personally, it has still been a hold situation. I think whether it's on the medium or the longer term, that this price will go up, because eventually I think that we will run out of these big stocks that are keeping the prices in check. But that's of course something that you have to decide for yourself. Obviously, some players are unloading their positions now with sizable. Here we get 109 million units as well, another 65 million units here as well. Some people are unwinding their Isogen positions right now, taking ISK over 40 ISK Isogen, which it's a choice to make. Of course, that's the investment game in EVE Online. It's pretty fascinating. For Isogen, I myself am not selling at the moment. After that, we have Noxium, and that's our second big winner, of course. Starts here at 250 and goes to almost 1250, and is currently able to be very close to its high point. 1,200 ISK for the sellers and 1,140 for the first buyer. Then perimeter, we've got a couple more at 1140. So there's definitely very strong demand for Noxium. And right away, look at the volume drop here: 1 million, 5 million. Those are the biggest orders, quite a few of them in the hundreds of thousands and even tens of thousands. And so that means that mining for Noxium, if you're finding some Noxium sources out there, that is another one of those mining activities that is bound to be very, very lucrative, very valuable. The efforts you're putting into the game, if you enjoy mining, make a part of that focusing on the best stuff, whether it's Mexalon or Noxium, and that should get you a pretty damn nice reward if you can manage to bring it to the market, of course. After that, we have Zydrine for nullsec, also a very big winner, especially on the 1 year chart. Over double the price, starts at 500 and is now substantially above 1250. 1350 in fact for the sellers, and that's only one of them. We're heading for 1400 ISK for Zydrine here and 1250 almost for the buyers. This is a very high price. I think even historically, this is definitely a high range for Zydrine. Mined in nullsec, although I think if you're lucky, there can be some other sources out there for Zydrine as well, but at the moment, super strong price. All of this stuff needs to be imported from nullsec. You can see this from these expiration dates. It's longer sell orders that lost on the market. There are still the top orders, and they're getting this price for their Zydrine. So definitely something that as a miner you can try to focus on. And then after that, we have our Megasite one, which is heading back for 600 ISK. Honestly, guys, if there are supplies out there, let me know. I'm gonna take actually a quick look at volumes this time. Volumes of Zydrine, around 25 million units being traded per day. Let's take a look at Megasite, if we can take a look at that. Does it give me a number? Ooh, 11 million, and those are actually 16 million. So that's definitely a lot lower in volume, which makes sense to me from the perspective that you generally get less Megasite per cubic meter, but it looks like you really need a lot less Megasite in the industry as well. And at the moment, yeah, it's only going for 612 ISK for the sellers, 580 for the buyers, half the price of Zydrine, which from the production perspective, you could say, from the creation perspective, does not make sense, because it's harder to make Megasite than it is to make Zydrine. Albeit not by all that much, but perhaps, you know, with all the new stuff out there, consumption of Megasite is that much lower than Zydrine in general industry cycles, and as a result, it's only worth half it to the market right now, because I can't see it being stocks, right? 2 million here. Those are the big orders. I can't see it being stocks for Megasite anymore. And so that's maybe something to keep in mind as well. I've been beating that drum on Isogen for quite a while, that there's bound to be big stocks, and I think that these volumes still confirm that. But it is entirely possible, of course, that that same equation plays as well, where production at the moment just also doesn't require a lot of Isogen, and that as a result, this price is not that abnormal. You could also say that if this is something that's still on the radar for CCP, you know, this would be one of the changes that they could do, require more Isogen in some of the new content that they potentially can create. Maybe even the same thing with Megasite as well, if they want to try to bring that in line. And then finally, I forgot this one last week, and I really should have covered it because it's making high after high. Here is Morphite, that is now, well, since you could say here November, so this is only less than 3 months. We've got one step up, 2, 3, and now a fourth step up to a 1-year high point. I'm going to say probably an all-time high at 83,580 ISK for a single unit of Morphite, 78,000 for the buyers. Those are crazy high prices, of course, super expensive. I remember some of my Morphite trades back in the day where I bought for less than 10,000 ISK and I was happy to sell for 15,000 or 18,000 ISK. This is completely bonkers. This is super high, of course. And if you have access to Morphite resources, I do think that you can recognize now that your efforts in EVE Online are not worthless. It may be harder to get, of course. That's all part of the change that CCP has done to mining. But if you do find a source for it, then you are, of course, looking pretty damn good. Next up, we'll have PI, but first, a little bit of water. Like that. So we're bringing PI at 2720. Like that. And here, let's get started. We have an opposite situation where for minerals we were looking for high points, and we actually have a little bit of losses starting to show in some of the price ranges. Here is PI, which has gone through a very bad fall and winter with very low points like here in the broadcast nodes, and look at that, the first slight bit of resurgence with broadcast nodes moving back up well above a million ISK at 1.3 million for the sellers, 1.2 million for the buyers. So it looks like it's a little bit more structural this time. We have the first sign of a comeback for a first advanced PI material. Now, I'm going to say that part of this is speculation. I think, like me, a lot of players are eagerly awaiting any news from CCP. And if it is structure news, right, if they're coming out with more structures, they even hinted at that in one of the dev blogs, that it would potentially be like smaller structures, but that would then give you a certain influence over your area of space or your system or something like that. That could be very interesting. And of course, this could require advanced PI material, considering what other structures cost. And so here I do think that we're starting to see our first investments anticipating on that. Also, honestly, for the longer term, it does make sense if you start to buy broadcast nodes below a million ISK. Look at where they started the year at. For the longer term, it could be a very good purchase. After that, we have construction blocks, which are not responding just yet. Starts here at 12,000 ISK and is currently selling for 7,000 ISK. Buyers are also coming in at 7,000 ISK. And so this is another one where you have to make sort of a choice. Do you think that we'll see a big comeback for construction blocks? Then investing now could be the ticket. On the other hand, we of course don't know. There's a reason why it is so low at the moment. It's because it's being massively oversupplied, and in general the philosophy from CCP has been very clear. They want effort, actual gameplay effort in the game to be rewarded. PI is about as passive as it gets, and so that loss in value to me is no real surprise, and I personally don't think CCP minds that much that PI has gone down in value. Consumer electronics tried to come back, and this is the danger of the investments that we've seen here in broadcast notes, is that, well, if you're too early, then the market may just punish you for that. And you can see now that fresh supply, while we worked our way from 6,250 back up well above 7,500 ISK, fresh supply has just crashed the price right back down to another 1 year low point. 5,600 lost just a couple days ago, 6,500 for the sellers, but 5,600 for those buyers, and so there's even dumping happening to those buyers as well at this point. Then we have the coolants market that is trying to land on 6,250 as well, another 50% loss over the last year in value. 6,000 for the sellers, 5,600 for the buyers here as well. Very, very low prices. Here next is the cryoprotectant solutions, a little bit different, right? Used in implants. There we go, this stuff. That one has actually been able to maintain a decent amount of value, 110,000 for the sellers, 105 for the buyers. I'm looking for potentially new implant sets to come out at some point next year. I think it could still happen, although we don't have any confirmation, of course, but I would try to jump in for cryoprotection solutions below 100,000 ISK, which has not materialized just yet. In December, you could have, early December, late November, you could have done those investments. Enriched uranium next, also definitely losing pretty much half its value, and is currently selling for less than 7,000 ISK. Buyers at 6,400 ISK. That's pretty low for something that's actually not easy to produce. Integrity response drones though, advanced PI materials, the second one that is clawing its way away from its 1 year low point, went for 1.1 million at the low end and is currently selling for 1.6. Buyers are at 1.4, so this does look in advanced PI materials to be a little bit more structural. Don't even need that much demand or volume for this to happen. It was completely out of vogue, we have to be honest, and so this comeback is definitely welcome, I think, and it could be different than, for instance, this consumer electronics situation where a big pullback or fallback just happened. Here, well, I think maybe they could have timed it right. It will depend a lot on what CCP announces next, of course. Mechanical parts going for 6,000 ISK on average, 6,500 for the sellers, and also 6,500 for a couple of buyers, so a little bit of demand coming in here to stem the tide, but it's still not that great, of course. And then we have our nanites. I think that one was... Oh, yeah, I really thought this was implants, but it's actually repair based, and then for potentially some, the clone mapper for the new super carrier ability, and that one is actually decently cheap at 5,000 ISK at the moment, 5,000 for the sellers, 4,800 for the buyers. Man, big volume spike that has not caused any change to the price. So this actually seems like a market that's very niche, very unique, and that has a sort of inertia to it, which means that it's not crashing down in the same way that a lot of the other PI materials is doing, because it probably has that consumption aspect down and it has found its balance. But we shouldn't expect this to really increase like some of these implant related ones, because this could really happen. We don't necessarily see what CCP is going to do that is going to require increased nanite consumption. So yeah, for quite a few weeks I actually said, oh, I thought this was the same bubble, an implant bubble, but that's not the case here, so be a little bit careful. Sure, you can buy cheap nanites, but I don't expect volatility or price increases because of an announcement on implants or anything like that. Nano factories, advanced PI material, that's not moving, but also we have to be honest here, lost a lot less over the last year, going for 770,000 for the sellers, 700,000 for the buyers, but started at 1 million. So you know, you don't necessarily have the same type of bottom as for instance with broadcast nodes where 50% of the value was lost. Organic mortar applicators next, still at a low point, but also same story, although losing 40% of its value from 1 million to the 600,000 ISK range, 650 for the sellers, 590 for the buyers. And that is also something that you could do. You can clearly see that some investments have been started in advanced PI materials, and so your chance to still try and grab some cheap ones may just lie in the cheaper ones. Recursive computing module from 1.5 to 1 million, loss of 30% of value, and super narrow margin between sellers and buyers. Same thing, although here, right, a bottom to 750, where it lost 50% of its value, did trigger a big purchase, which then was quickly flattened quite a lot by fresh supply. So always be careful, this can happen as well. Big investments. I think they went way too big here, up to the 1.25 million mark. They should have kept it at 1 million. This part of the investment is already looking pretty good. This part is looking like potential loss for whoever made this investment at the moment, of course. Longer term, if advanced PI materials make a comeback on structure announcements, then you are looking pretty good, of course, with a lot of them. Robotics continuing the bad news. Didn't think we would see that, but it just broke through 60,000 ISK and is still going down. 59,600 for the sellers and 56,000 for the buyers. Very cheap robotics tied to fuels, and one where, well, I think investors have been caught out a couple of times. So from 90,000 here down to 80, we can clearly see a slight upswing, which must have been some investments, but then we slowly made our way through the 80,000 ISK barrier. Same thing at 70k. All right, this ought to be, this is a very clear 1 year low point, should be a good time to invest. So they're bumping it up to 73,000, not even that aggressive or anything, and then we crash right back through that 70,000 ISK. Same thing for 60, right, slight upswing here as well, and then we're right back down. So it's this is definitely a story of catching some of the falling knives here, although what we don't see, luckily I would say, is like a push up back to 80 or something like that, right? That would have been very bad news for whoever bought that upswing, but it's there every single time we play with one of these psychological barriers, you could say, price points where the market says, really, below 70k, I'm gonna buy those robotics. Turns out that was too early. Really, 60k, I'm gonna buy those robotics. Well, turns out that you were still too early. How low can this stuff go? Very difficult to say at the moment. Self-harmonizing power cores also still struggling from 2 million down to 1 million, 1.2 almost for the sellers, just above 1 million for the buyers. If you're looking or expecting this trend to catch up here as well, self-harmonizing power cores are pretty interesting in that potential value increase from the start of the year. Sterile conduits, also definitely much more limited in the loss, going for 820 now, 775, also much more narrow margin here, so that one not that interesting, I don't think. Yukomi superconductors, that ought to be implants, right? I'm correct. Yes, implants and mobile tractor units. Actually, another one that has done decently well. Starts here at 100,000, is currently at 75,000, so did lose a little bit, but 71 for the sellers, 62 for the buyers. Honestly, on an implant announcement, if you can buy Yukomi superconductors close to that 63,000 ISK range at the moment, that is not that bad. That's potentially something to look into as well. And then finally, the wetware mainframes starts at 2.25 million, goes down to 1 million. And so here again, investors are starting to move on those. 1.4 million almost for the sellers, almost 1.3 million for the buyers here as well. So our first signs that investors are expecting a bottom to start to form in PI materials. Very interesting. And part of that value game that I was talking about, right? If you're like mining Mexelon and mining Noxium and you're turning that into ISK, what do you want to do with that? Do you want to hold on to your mix and things like that at the moment? I don't think so, considering those charts. And then some PI could actually look pretty damn juicy for the longer term. Next up, our advanced moon materials, coming in at 39 minutes. Let's take a look at these. First of all, crystalline carbonite for Galente ship production. Alright, going back down a little bit and definitely below average. I would say 140 for the sellers and 129 for the buyers is still not that bad though. Supply wise, half a page, nothing completely outlandish. So probably a little bit more supply that has brought us back. Well, 140 is around average. It's not that much below average. So holding decently well. We'll see if we can get another upswing volatile period working its way through crystalline carbonates. The story here for me is decently strong prices and some volatility. So for Galente ship production, that was looking quite okay. Then where we had the real volatility was in Caldari. So let's take a look at that one. Titanium carbide for Caldari, and it is continuing the trend back up to a high point of 180 ISK for the sellers, 174 for the buyers. Look at that aggressive buying coming in here as well. Now this is tradable. This is not the long-term stuff, but this is sell close to 180, buy at 140, sell at 170, buy at 140, sell at 180, and all of that potentially done in just the last 3 months or so. This is where a lot of ISK was made and lost for players that are willing to go with a little bit more risk, of course, because you never know when you can sell, how much you can sell. It's a difficult proposition, but really the Caldari one shows a lot of interest and a lot of volatility, which has made that price less predictable and which has been very good for the Tech 2 Caldari ships as well. After that, we have the Minmatar one, which is Fernite Carbide. This one is alright, trying to make its way back here at the tail end, back to 147.5 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. The bad news for this one is that I feel like it did move to like a lower range, and these two big spikes here were definitely tied to the war, because the Imperium uses Minmatar Tech 2 cruisers as part of their fleet doctrines, so that created a little bit of expectation in the market, and so you get this very big boost. But outside of those two, we clearly have this. We're staying below 150, we're actually moving below the 125 range, and now we have a little bit of volatility, but no breakouts back above 150. So very hard to say that the Minmatar ships have that much interest outside of the Imperium meta, you could say. But there is some, and they haven't just generally lost value, which has been the case, I would say, for the Amar stuff. Here is Tungsten Carbide, and that is of course the mirror opposite, you could say, of Caldari. We clearly moved from a 175 to 200 range here in first part of the chart, then we moved to 150 to 175, and now we're actually at a 125 to 150 range. So this is clearly just a downgrading for Tungsten Carbide to a very low range of 142 for the sellers, 138 for the buyers. So relatively speaking, it's in line still price-wise for with the Galente stuff, for instance, but on this chart it is definitely losing a lot of value, and that's the other one. Should you start investing here? Well, I don't have the answers, honestly. Everyone has to make their own choices, but this is clearly something that has lost a lot of value over the last year here. For the meta materials, we have photonic meta materials for Galente, clearly also losing a lot of value. Starts at 15,000, this settles below 12.5, so lost a decent chunk of value. It's in fact below 12,000 for the sellers, 11,360 for the buyers, so that's a little bit of loss here. Slight upwards movement to be spotted at the tail end though, so who knows if there's a bit of a comeback in the making. For the Caldari, it's non-linear metamaterials, right? Again, that volatility is clearly in Caldari ship production, high points of 25,000, and not that long ago we were almost there. Bottoms are dropping though, so below 20k here now, 17.5. That is clearly a lower bottom, so a little bit of pressure on the price, sure, but that volatility, I mean, if you could trade this stuff here, it's super nice, of course. Very impressive non-linear metamaterials, currently going for 22,300, buyers at 2570. Compare that to the Galente one that we just saw here. That's double the price. So yeah, again, very good of course for the Caldari Tech 2 ships if you're looking for unpredictability and high prices. Then we have the Minmatar one. Here is Plasmonics. Again, slightly better, especially at the tail end, making its way back to 20,000, 19,000 on a lack of supply, 17,000 for the buyers, but clearly again also moving to that lower range here at the end of the winter, or the end of last year. And then for the MR one, I think it's going to be another, yeah, very obvious, right? Managed to maintain a price above 20,000 disc for almost the first half of the year, moved down to 17.5, and then now actually moved to 12,500 at the tail end here. For a 1 year low point. We're moving our way back up from that, but it's pretty obvious that interest in the MR cycle seems to be down quite substantially. Then we have our other products, fermionic condensates. These generally have been under pressure, so we're just going to go through this decently quickly and see if there's any turnaround. So we get a slight pull up from the bottom, but there clearly is still no interest, real resurgence in interest in any of these goods. Fullerenes still down, hypersynaptic fibers still below 10,000 ISK, nanotransistors, alright, back up to 5,000 ISK. What's happening here? 4,650 for the sellers, 4,400 for the buyers. A first one that's trying as well. We do have a volume, so part of this is going to be investment in my opinion, which makes sense. We were substantially below 4,000 ISK, so that was potentially the right move to do. I would say the next weeks are going to be very interesting then for nanotransistors. Will it be able to keep these gains, or will any supply really crash this down very quickly? So a first attempt, you could say, in the other advanced PI materials here in nanotransistors to look for a bottom and to start some investing. Phenolic composites, also slight jump up here from a very pronounced 1 year low point as well though, and a little bit less based on the volume, so be careful on this one. Could just be a bit of drying up of activity. 1,500 for the sellers, 1,370 for the buyers, still pretty low. And then we have our ceramic fibers, just above 300 is super low as well, of course. Still losing 50% from that 450 start. All right, let's move on to our Tech 2 ships, and that's coming in at 46.25. And let's see what we can spot here. So here is the Basilisk for Caldari, very strong November, December, up to 230 million ISK, managing to maintain that price for quite a bit. And then right here at the year, when we went from 2020 to 2021, so very late December, early January, a bottom price of 180 for the average. So you could have bought this super low, and we're starting to make our way back up a little bit, but it's still not that much. 200 million for the sellers, 182 for the buyers. I would say 182 for the buyers is still pretty low. It's still right here on that chart. Then we have the Cerberus. Well, look at that. Also, same thing. Low point this late December, early January, but already a resurgence back to 180. So this is definitely tradable, showing that Caldari volatility. 295 million for the sellers, 247 for the buyers. So you could have bought this probably for less than 200 million less than a month ago, and now you're looking at a 30% profit pretty much on that one. Not bad at all. Then we have our Amar Tech 2 logistics cruiser, the Guardian, and that one, unfortunately, if you're looking for volatility, is not showing that. It's basically mirroring that advanced PI material segment for Amar. So here we had some volatility, right? High points 250 plus to 300 million even on an occasion. Low point below 200 million. Buy there made a lot of sense. Then we lost all volatility for a period, and now we actually moved to the 180 million average range. And so this is not enough to trade on, unfortunately. So you could again make that same long-term evaluation. Do you think that this is actually way too low, especially compared to, for instance, the Caldari ships? I mean, at some point we could expect this to make a comeback, and then buying for close to 165 for a Guardian. Let's try and get that to show up on the chart that's down here. Still makes a hell of a lot of sense if you look at the entire chart here. So yeah, difficult choice, honestly. Of course, this looks very risky, but this could be a big opportunity. Then we've got the Hound. Smaller ships and stealth bombers tended to do a little bit better, although Minmatar so clearly lost a step, right? Bottoms below 25. First half of the year, very pronounced. High points 35 million, so that's nicely tradable. Then a little bit of hesitation here. We moved to a bottom of 20 million, and then we managed to pull up above 30 million here, and now we're back on our way down. Probably a lot of supply. Well, it's drying up already. 22.5 million for the sellers, less than 21 million for the buyers. This is clearly stopping now, so that's kind of interesting. This could be the right time to hopefully ride another Hound wave, if that supply stop is indeed confirmed. The Ikitursa back down to less than 800 million ISK. We're talking 795 for the sellers, 734 for the buyers. On some supply, right, just half a dozen ship, bring us down from 814 to 795. This chart clearly showing that Triglavian stuff is very expensive, Pogven not super accessible, very difficult to bring the supplies out, you could say, and also to actually make a lot of supplies for Triglavian stuff. And here, yeah, I would not be investing in Triglavian stuff myself, although you could ask yourself the question, is this what CCP wants? Do they want Triglavian ships and Edencom ships to be the cream of the crop, the super expensive stuff that only Omega players that really want that super unique experience, because they do have very unique weapon systems, and then they'll have to pay the ISK for that. And I think that is possible, right? At first, perhaps they had really big plans where the Triglavians would become the 5th race, and you would have a full line, right? I mean, we have dreadnoughts now, we have battleships, battlecruiser, cruiser, frigate, destroyer, we get everything. So they were clearly building up quite a lot of the Triglavian stuff, and then they had Edencom come out, which was like the polar opposite, right? Rather than armor and then a single point weapon, you had an AoE weapon with shield ships, and so for a moment it really looked like, all right, if CCP continues on this trend, then both of these could become like very big new pools and a complete economy of their own with full cycles. But they may have pulled back from that a little bit and said, maybe we still need something that is also super expensive, super unique, something to shoot for on the very long term for newer players, and that would still make sense to me as well, right? Which means that an Ikitursa, a Tech 2 cruiser, excuse me, is going for 800 million ISK, and this is basically the Pogven story here that has decreased supplies quite substantially, as all of the Triglavian content throughout regular highsec and things like that has gone, and yeah, it means super expensive and exclusive content and ships, of course. Next up, we've got the Ishtar, our first comeback, and it is a Galente one as well, so that's pretty interesting. Went to a bottom of 180 million and is currently back to 215. Buyers coming in at 190 million, and definitely this one is not one that I'm keeping here for active trading, but rather to take a gauge of what may be happening with the Tech 2 ship market, or Tech 2 market in general, because the Ishtar has its uses, of course, in all aspects of EVE Online. You know, it's a good combat ship, it's a good PvP ship, good for PvE as well, and in my opinion, pretty much like an all-in-one platform that you can even use that in missions, you can use that for hacking, right? Still makes sense to me for like data and relic sites and all of that stuff, really that all-in-one ship. So nice to see that come back for me personally. It does mean that there is no real full Tech 2 crash. There was maybe a little bit of a difficult time here in December, but overall we are starting to recover, and then the Kaldari ships are the ones where volatility is definitely still reigning. So the Manticore, granted, a new bottom as well, right below that first part of the chart. We didn't go below 25 million ISK. Now we touched 20 million on a couple of occasions, but you can also make your way back towards 30 million as well, so that is still doable in trading. At the moment it's 25.5 for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers, so right in the middle of things. Too early to buy and too late to sell, but I kind of like these. You know, if you can find 20 million on the Manticore, then you're probably looking at a good purchase. Then we've got the Munin also clawing its way back above 200 million is pretty good. Some volumes, so definitely some alliance buying happening there as well. 243 million for the sellers and 208 for the buyers. Very big margin between sellers and buyers. Yeah, Minmatar is struggling. They've got some ships that are very popular, but a lot of the others, I think, are having a hard time. The Nemesis, all right, the waves are starting to come back here again, right? So you have this below 25 million predictability in the first half of the chart, then we drop down to 20. Still actually a pretty good trade to be done here with a high point at 27.5. And then again, you know, October, November, December, I would say, especially here, definitely struggling with, are we crashing, are we not crashing? That was the vibe here when we went back to 20 million, back towards 20 million again, but we are starting to again make a little bit of a better high at 26 million. Currently the in-between plays again, 24 to 26 million for the sellers, 22 million for the buyers, so definitely not the best place to be doing trades just yet, but I would say I'm starting to see signs that the waves are coming back. And the Oneros has definitely confirmed that. Completely dead for July to November, right? No activity, just more pressure, more pressure, more pressure going down and down and down. And here the kickoff apparently has been done in December. Low point below 160 million, then we went to 200, back down to 150, and now we're back up to 210 million. Is 215 for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one in my book. This was also a part of me looking for that general Tech 2 crash, because we were depressed for so many months and there was just no sign of any life in this, but it's back. Look at that. This is tradable. This is why the Tech 2 ships are in EVE Talk, because here you can make and lose a lot of ISK in a short amount of time. But if you bought below 160 and you're able to sell now at 214, I think you're pretty damn happy with that. Then we're adding in the Panther, which is staying above a billion ISK, so another sign that we're doing okay. Above a billion for the sellers and just below a billion for the buyers. Next up here we get the Purifier for Amar. Yeah, this one, you know, the one where it's hardest to see that volatility. We just saw, right, that their production chain is depressed. So here, this was pretty nice, right? 35 million, touch 25, 35 again, go to 25, go to 35, and then we broke that 25 million, and then hesitation has set in. And here at the tail end, volatility is just gone. We're currently selling for less than 25 million. Buyers are at 22.5 million. Now on this full chart, this is definitely pretty low, but it's that same thing, right? Or are we here with the Amar ships, or do we still have some more depression time to come? Difficult choice to make, I admit. Then we get the Scimitar. Okay, able to stay above 200 million, then below 200 million, but generally not that big of a mover. 212 now for the sellers, 187 for the buyers, so slight uptick here, but it is basically on sellers going up. Buyers are still very aggressive, I would say, trying to get those cheap scimitars. Then the Widow is staying just below 1.1 billion for the sellers and above a billion for the buyers, so decently average, nothing too out of line. And the Zealot is slowly crawling away back above 200 million as well, away from that bottom. 203 for the sellers, still 185 for the buyers. Amar again clearly losing a bit of a step when it comes to the volatility and the trade potential, but we just saw with the Oneros here, you never know when the market decides that it's time for that volatility to come back. So this for me is very, very good news. This is a sign that we've been struggling a little bit, and the Caldari ones have basically kept us going when it comes to volatility and trade. But this is the first one where we really see it coming back, and so I would say potentially we could be at the start of some Tech 2 trading making a comeback. Next up, Tech 3 ships coming in at 58.5. Alright, as always, we'll start with the destroyers, and here is the confessor, and able to maintain the gains. I thought we would build, well, maybe we did build a little bit here. Let's see what this is. This is 45.5, so no, we didn't build that much anymore. We're at 45 million for one seller, then it's 47 million, and then the buyers have been pushed up a little bit, up to 40 million ISK. Now, if we lose this one ship, then we did just gain 2 more million ISK, and that was my expectation. It could still happen, right? We're still moving our way up here a little bit. It will depend on the other ships, but my read on this one was, I think the Hecate was still very much at a big premium. The Jackdaw was also drawing in a lot of supplies, and so the Confessor, I thought, had room to grow a little bit more. If this one was not here, then we would have made it, and I would say, yeah, definitely sell those Confessors, which I expected would be going up, and you could have bought for 35 million at late December. Oh man, and now my neighbors are starting to make a little bit of noise. I hope that it doesn't come through too much. But yeah, this Confessor, very nice and predictable trade that you could have made on this upswing. And now, well, let's take a look at the others. Will this potentially stay dried up? Honestly, I think there's not a lot of ships. I think supply will start to make its way back, especially when we see this. The Hecate is finally coming down on that supply, away from 50 million ISK down to 46 million for the sellers, 43 million for the buyers. Get a couple of 50s here. This is clearly stabilized. And then we have the Jackdaw, which has also stabilized at 45 million ISK and had this one big sell order. So I would say, yeah, for the Confessor, take your profit now if you bought at 35 million, because supplies are going to start to materialize and are definitely not going to allow for that much more of a breakout. But overall, yeah, this was like a 10 million trade that was pretty easy and predictable, thanks to how nicely regularly working the tactical destroyer market is, in my opinion. And then we get this Vapel. Ooh, breakout to 50 million ISK here. 55 million for the sellers, 44.5 million for the buyers. Maybe changes my perspective a little bit, because the Vapel is going to now draw a decent amount of supply. The one question is, it is the least popular one, but it is being produced. I do think this could get plugged a little bit more quickly than, for instance, the Hecate that has stayed at 50 million for about 2 months. So this is a sign that, yeah, maybe the Confessor can still grow a little bit, but on the other hand, I do think ships are ready, basically, to take advantage of this one. So I'm not sure. We'll have to see. Next week is going to be interesting. I'm kind of expecting the Confessor to stabilize, the Hecate to actually confirm this downtrend and to stabilize here as well. The Jackdaw is at 45 and is basically the anchor that's keeping everything at around that 45 million ISK range. And this Vapel breakout is a little bit unexpected. Definitely a nice opportunity if you can still sell a couple of Vapels at the moment. And then the question is, will it draw a lot of supply? I think it will very quickly, but I still think there is room for new Confessors to come in and keep things in check there as well. That's my read on the situation. I could be wrong on that, and then the Confessor could actually be going higher if the first plugging that Vapel gap means that we have a further delay on the Confessor. You can see it doesn't need that much to go to a 50 and even a 62 million ISK. So that's the gamble. Not as certain of this as I was of this increase in price, but it could still happen. So it's going to be interesting. Honestly, it's going to be interesting to see how that one reacts. This market reacts to that unexpected Vapel breakout. For the cruisers, we've got the Legion that is currently basically moving in that 160 to 180 range, currently selling for 167, buyers at 153. Buyers definitely starting to drop out of the market though, so that's interesting. And again, kind of a reverse of what you would expect. If you remember covering these cruiser markets at these low points of around 130 million, we had these low points at next to no supply, and now we actually have moved to a higher band of trading, and we're doing so on next to no demand, which again just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Let's take a look at the Loki, currently going for around 180, so not that bad. 178 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. That's a little bit better, but it is the most popular one. Then we have the Proteus that's making its way back to 180 as well. 178 for the sellers, 158 for the buyers. they're there, but it's not a lot. And then finally we get a Tengu that's also moving its way back up actually to 190 on the ticker. It's 190 for the sellers, 169 for the buyers. Again, really decently long, big margin opening up. There's some buying happening here. So it's a weird one, this cruiser market. Honestly, for me, when it comes to this one, look for that 1 year low point. Then you can maybe buy one if you're feeling like taking some risk in Tech 3 cruisers, and then try to sell at a profit. But I would never risk more than one ship, which for instance for the Confessor, right, a bit of buying, maybe even half a dozen or so at 35 million made a lot of sense. And I think looking at these sellers, right, you can pretty easily sell half a dozen Confessors at a decent profit if you bought them for 35 million. So yeah, far more predictable. I definitely still prefer the tactical destroyer market over the tactical cruiser market for investing rather than gambling. And then finally we have the extra products for this week. Actually a bit of a request. Someone asked me to take a look at the Tech 1 cruisers this week. 1 hour, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. Like that. So let's do that. Ships, battle cruisers, and standard, I think, and it was, I think, like stuff like the Oracle, these glass cannons, you could say, that were looking pretty interesting. So this 1 year chart starts at 40 million ISK and is currently going for 80 million. Obviously, right, the mineral changes making its way through this price range as well. Currently dropping off just a little bit, but still 79 million for the sellers, 70 million for the buyers. Pretty damn expensive Harbinger, in line with the expectation. Here is the Oracle, starts the year at, what would this be, 60, something like that. Let's see here, yeah, a little bit above 60 million ISK, currently selling for 120, so that's another 100% gain on the seller side, and 104 for the buyers. There is a bit of volatility at the tail end here though. 1 year high point of 140 and 150 reached in November and mid-January. So at the moment we basically normalized back to the 120 range, which is still very expensive and in line with the mineral move. Then we get a prophecy, right? Starts at 40, ends at 80. Again, decently normal, you could say, but also a little bit of a breakout here to 90 million, 1 year high point just about 10 days ago. Next up for the Caldari, here is the Drake, actually reaching a 1 year high point right now. Starts below 40 million and is currently selling for a rather expensive 93 million ISK, 84 for the sellers. I mean, this used to be a price that you could probably get a cheap battleship on, and now it's a battle cruiser. Basically, yeah, everything is a bit more expensive. Next up here we get the Ferox, first counter move, you could say. Starts below 40, high point of 80 million, and actually lost 50% of those gains in December and January, selling for 9 million, buyers coming in at 55.7. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the Ferox is a nullsec meta, and so that a part of this is that it's just more popular, but that also means that it's being produced a lot more than the others, and as a result you have this depression on the price. And then here we've got the Naga. Ooh, alright, very interesting. 1 year high point here as well for the Naga, going up above 130, and if you look at that from a 1 year perspective, starts at 50 million ISK, ends at 142 million ISK. This is a little bit more than just the mineral price index that has gone up in price here. This is definitely a very, very nice little breakout at tail end. This one makes more sense, right, where we started off at 50 million to 100 million, but this is an unexpected breakout. Very, very nice, 50%. I think here, right, if you're looking at the cost of production, maybe we can actually see, can I see that in industry? Would be interesting. So I'm going to do this one, view in industry. Yeah, let's maybe quickly try to do that. All right, that does work. No input materials required. That doesn't make sense. Oh yeah, but it does when you don't go for industry. So here 123 to 124 at average mineral prices. Output 106 considered average, but you're actually selling it for 150 million at the moment. Yeah, definitely a bit of margin opening up here in the Naga with that move up. Next up, if you had for Galente, here is the Brudix. I think those regular ones, right, 40 million, ends above 80 million. Pretty normal. Myrmidon starts at 40, ends at 90, slightly more popular. Makes sense to me. Not that much supply. Maybe we could do that exercise here again as well. view in industry. Let's take a quick look at this here. Production cost 89, 82 average, but you're selling for 92. So this, you know, basically it's the mineral cost that has pretty much doubled the price. And then the talos, was that where we had to look at, starts at 62 and ends at 130. That to me is another regular doubling with not that much supply. And then we have the Minmatar Cyclone, starts at 40, ends at 70. Right, Minmatar still a little bit less popular apparently. Then we get the Hurricane, also 40 to 70. And then finally we get the Tornado that about a week ago, 10 days ago, did break out to 1 year high point of probably around 120 million. So that's another 20 million up above that doubling in price. Unfortunately, it looks like that has been filled very quickly with tornadoes, bringing the price down here in half a page from 120 down to 103 million ISK. So there was clearly some action, and there still is a little bit of action in the Naga at the moment, where you get a nice premium. So if you can make these quickly and bring them to the market, you're looking at a very nice profit, and your jump off point looking for that profit is apparently double the price it was a year ago, which is normal, right? That's what's happened with the minerals, and the Tech 1 ships are basically first in line to take the brunt of that increased price. So very interesting suggestion, and definitely these not sure if they have like a special name or attribute or something like that, but they are like the latest line of battle cruisers that actually use oversized weapons, like the Naga, like the Oracle has some volatility, the Talos a little bit, not as much as the others, and then the Tornado, of course, the ganking ship, just went from a 1 year high point as well. So really interesting seeing this general trend showing, and then that volatility, that extra volatility that of course creates opportunities as well. And that's going to be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.